All right, welcome back to Inside the Musician's Brain. I'm your host, Chris Pandolfi from the infamous String Dusters. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Today we have episode 56. Stick around, and in a few minutes you'll hear my conversation with AJ Lee. AJ is an excellent singer, mandolin player, and a real up-and-comer on the bluegrass and acoustic scene. She's got a killer band, AJ Lee and Blue Summit, and I have to say, AJ is wise beyond her years. I really enjoyed this talk. Stick around to hear her insights, her story, all that good stuff coming up in just a minute. Real quick, I got to tell you about my very cool sponsors this season, helping me make the podcast happen. Fly Low is an excellent apparel brand from right here in Colorado. And if you're someone who loves gear that is both functional and stylish like me, you will love Fly Low. That's really hard to find, stuff that's quality, but also has the vibe that you want. I wear my Fly Low stuff for pretty much everything. I wear it skiing, I wear it fly fishing, I wear it hanging here at home, I wear it on stage. They make stuff for mountain biking. This stuff does it all. For all your apparel needs, check out Fly Low. My other sponsor this season is Turtlebox. Turtlebox is the best USB speaker out there right now. This thing is rugged, waterproof, portable. It has an all-day battery, and most importantly, it sounds good. You can crank it up loud. The sound quality is really, really good, and they have a newer, smaller, more portable Turtlebox called the Ranger that I've really been digging. Good stuff. For all your USB speaker needs, make sure you check out Turtlebox. Inside the Musician's Brain is also brought to you by Osiris Media. Osiris is home to so much great music podcast content. We're also brought to you by Americana Vibes. That's the infamous String Dusters record label. And this season, you've heard me talk about my partnership with volume.com, where the top acts go to stream shows, podcasts, and more. So you can see video of all of season 6 over at volume.com. You can see video from some of the best episodes from past seasons going up at Volume. And for this episode, and for episode 54 with Del McCurry, we actually shot these interviews with 5 or so cameras at a very cool studio in Lyons. And it's always great to do the interviews in person and to be able to see them, to be able to see the emotion and to be able to see people tell their story, I think really makes a big difference. I loved the in-person interviews because I've done so much of this podcast remote, but the interviews this past summer just got me thinking I want to do more of that. Of course, virtual has its virtues, if you will. I actually just scheduled an interview with Bahamas for a few weeks from now. I love his music, and he will be in London. So my first transatlantic convo that's coming up a little later this season on Inside the Musician's Brain. Okay, gotta let everyone know, if you don't already, that the String Dusters have a new album coming out early next year. And I think I'm going to get one or a couple of my bandmates on before this season is through to talk about the album, because there really is a good backstory. The album is called 2020. It's 20 songs for our 20th year as a band. That's crazy to say. There are 3 singles that are out already. The full album drops in late January. We legit wrote almost, if not 50 songs for this new record to choose from. So a lot of work went into it. And like I said, we'll unpack that a little bit more. I will say on the personal side, one cool thing for me, this was the first record of ours that I wrote my own songs for. I've written a lot of course, instrumentals, tunes for the band. That's been an awesome role that I've played through really all of our albums. And I've had a hand in co-writes, collaborating on writing songs, but I got really inspired in the run-up to this record, and I spent a lot of my creative time in 2023, 24, learning how to write songs, writing bad songs before I wrote some okay songs, before I wrote a couple songs that ended up on the record. And it was a great experience. It was like really digging into something new, and we don't get to do that every day, but it's a great challenge. And I think it's really, really good for you to take on something new, because it's really good to be back on that steep part of the learning curve, that feeling of endless possibilities, right? The curiosity, and also the lack of built-in patterns and self-judgment around how good you are. Because you're brand new at it, so you don't have any expectations. You're not supposed to be any good. And that whole idea reminds me of one of my favorite books of all time, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Check it out. It's a pretty classic intro to Zen Buddhism, and I'll give you a quote here that kind of sums things up. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's, there are few. Really, really powerful right there. And that's the idea, right? That the more we can find that energy of the beginner's mind, the more possibilities we perceive, and the more possibilities that we perceive, the more possibilities there are. So, amazing concept right there. The challenge is applying that perspective to things that we have done a lot over many years, things that we've become really good at, but maybe have gotten in a rut with. It's applying the beginner's mind philosophy to those things that can be really difficult, because when we put all that time into something, we gain mastery, we gain understanding, but we also gain expectations and then make judgments about how good we're doing, about how good we are. And those judgments, they turn into patterns that can be really hard to break, and away we go, right? That's where the thoughts get involved. I know that I've certainly deal with this in my career. And thoughts, of course, can kill freedom, creativity, expression right quick. But understanding those thoughts and then accepting them for what they are, that is such an important, essential practice. And in a few minutes, you're going to hear AJ dig into this topic a little bit. And she shares a really cool perspective that I think can help us understand the thoughts, the judgments in a different way. She's talking more specifically about being nervous and how she still gets nervous when she goes on stage, as many performers do. And she shares some advice that her mom gave her. Her mom said, if you're not nervous, it means you don't care. And I love that way of looking at it. I love that connection between a feeling, nervousness, that usually has a very negative connotation, with something that's actually very positive. The fact that you care, right? Nervousness viewed in a different way is just a sign that you care, that something's important to you. And if you can embrace that perspective, it gives you this kind of pathway to accepting that feeling instead of fighting that feeling. And the fighting is where the thoughts come in. But I can definitely get down with the idea that it's a sign that I care, right? I'm down with that. I don't need to fight that. That's the most natural thing in the world. Of course, you care. It's just not, I think, the feeling that comes right to mind. It's a perspective that we need to keep top of mind. And knowing something like this, it might not change anything overnight, but if you do keep it top of mind over time, it can make a huge difference. So just keep reminding yourself, say it out loud even. That can be a very powerful exercise. I'm only feeling this because I care. And then, of course, you can extrapolate that out and you can apply it to many different parts of life. You can replace the weird, like judgy thoughts with acceptance and curiosity. And in turn, you really do open the door to new possibilities. It just takes time. It just takes practice. And I love that part of our conversation. I couldn't believe a few episodes ago hearing Del McCurry talking about getting nervous before he goes on stage. Still to this day was amazing to hear. It was freeing, really. And you'll hear more from AJ on this topic in just a moment. I'm a fan of AJ Lee. I loved getting together for this talk. AJ is a great musician, but she's also a great hang, and I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about her in the years to come. Let's jump ahead now to my conversation with AJ Lee. Here we go. All right, we're here on Inside the Musician's Brain, and my guest today is one of the rising stars in bluegrass and acoustic music, an amazing singer, songwriter, mandolin player, AJ Lee. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so great to have you. And for context for our listeners, if you haven't checked AJ out, she fronts her own amazing band, AJ Lee and Blue Summit. And we're actually chatting here in Lyons, Colorado. You guys are here for the Rocky Grass Festival, as the String Dusters are as well. And a lot of great bands around. And yours is one of them. You guys just got nominated for Best New Artist at the IBMA Awards. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you were nominated for Female Vocalist of the Year. How cool is that?
It's pretty cool. I was telling some friends actually last night, just having my name that close to Alison Krauss, that's good enough for me. That's, I feel like I've made it at that point.
You deserve it, I should say. You're a great singer, and I always say one of my favorite things about hosting a podcast is it gives me an excuse to listen to everyone's music. And you guys obviously have your cover-to-cover EP coming out, and that's sort of trickling out now, and we're going to talk about that. Love your last record, City of Glass, that came out last year, and I just was really struck by, there's a lot of great elements. The band sound, the playing is great, but your vocals are really sort of a standout there. And I was curious about how you become a better singer and sort of how you approach that, is because it's a little bit less tangible than, say, working on an instrument where there's this very defined, we sit down and practice, versus our voice is something that we're using right now. It's always with you. So how do you approach becoming a better singer?
I think a lot of it, at least what I've been trying to do in the last few years, is be more comfortable taking more risks, I'd say. I think I learned especially in the studio, when you can hear your voice back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're singing live, you kind of have this perception of how you sound already. But once you hear it back, it's a little bit kind of totally different than how you imagine it sounds.
It really is.
So I've noticed in the studio, at least, I'll try to put a lot of feeling into something, but when I hear back, I'm like, well, that doesn't sound exactly like as soulful, or as like maybe a little bit as aggressive as I initially thought. So I've been trying a little bit to just be more comfortable, like putting in a slight growl here and there, trying to be a little bit more bluesy, but mostly just relaxing and not thinking about it, but not thinking about it at the same time.
So it sounds like you craft some of your vocal parts in the studio based on what you're hearing back once you give it a try. So when you go into the studio, you don't have a part fully formed. It's maybe going to take life as you listen and kind of adjust.
Yeah. And of course, like with any song, once we've played it enough times, then it gets easier. Like if we have a song that we've been performing for maybe a year or two, then we can go in the studio and it seems like it's already fully crafted because we've already worked out all the kinks vocally and instrumentally. But if you have a new song, you kind of have to experiment with how you perceive it sounds and how you actually want it to sound.
I commend AJ Lee and Blue Summit. You guys as a band, you really do a great job of adapting to a wide variety of songs. It seems like that's really a part of your guys' thing is sort of cutting this wide swath, and that's really cool. And that includes a lot of different vocal treatments. So when you're talking about taking some chances, throwing in a growl, whatever it might be, do you feel like you're emulating specific singers that you love, or are you more trying to do your own thing?
I try to do a little bit of my own thing, but also I really like Bonnie Raitt, and I grew up kind of listening to a few Bonnie Raitt tracks here and there. My mom raised me on some Merle Haggard and Buck Owens and Bonnie and Allison and all those great artists.
Pretty good singers.
Pretty darn good. But yeah, I feel like all my life, my mom has taught me this philosophy where you want the song to pretty much sing itself. I've never tried to be a stylistic singer or, do a lot of vocal fry or like have that pop kind of sound with the attitude. But as I get older, I realize, adding a little bit of your own flavor into the song is what makes you a unique artist. So I'm continuously trying to develop a sound that I feel comfortable with, along with, paying homage to the song and how it was originally sung. So there's like that balance.
Yeah. So you said you listen back in the studio and that really helps inform what you do. Do you guys listen back to your shows and do a similar thing with your performances?
Oh, sometimes when we can handle it. So sometimes there'll be like, a guy handing you a flash drive at the end of the show, or like a CD. And like if it's a CD, it's easy because, we don't really have CD players at our house, but we're in the rental car or our van and we'll just pop in the CD and listen. And usually we'll have a lot of critiques about ourselves, but
it's humbling.
It's
but
very
it's such
humbling.
A good way to learn.
It is, and that's why we we do it occasionally. It's hard to stomach it sometimes.
Do you listen back and you're expecting one thing, and then you're like, oh, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a lot of that. There's more of that than I think in my own mind. I think at least these days, because we're usually listening back to songs that in a tour cycle or in a year, we've already played them for a few months to a few years already. So there's generally, theoretically, pretty good already.
It's the irony of being your own harshest critic is like, it's a curse and a blessing. It's the thing that pushes you forward, but it's also the thing that makes you not want to listen to the live show right after you play, right?
Yep. No, you need that. You need to be your own worst critic.
I heard you say in an interview, I believe with Nick on E-Town, that your mom was an important critic for you and that she would give you feedback on songs.
Yes. My mom has been really great in that way. Even now, I'll like send her a song or something or she actually does a lot of unsolicited advice, which, Mom, if you hear this, I still really appreciate. But it is very much.
Mom.
I love you, Mom. But it is very unsolicited. She'll like text me randomly about like a show, and she'll be like, "You know what? I think the harmonies on that one, they're a little too loud. I think you could pull back on those harmonies a little bit." And it's always pretty good advice. She has a really good ear, but when you get a text like that from your mom, you're like, "Oh, Mom."
But there's got to be some element of trust there because it's your mom and it sounds like that's cool though because I don't think a lot of people have that relationship.
Yeah, no, I'd say a lot of her ideas, 70% of them are good ideas and that I take, which is pretty good percentage, I think.
So back to these IBMA nominations, because that's a really big deal, getting that kind of recognition from your fans, from your peers, from so many musicians. Bluegrass people take their music very seriously, and there's a high value placed on quality, and you obviously fall right into that category. I was so pumped to see you nominated for, I think, Best New Artist. I maybe expected that because you guys are making waves, but Female Vocalist of the Year. What do those nominations mean to you? Is that something that really lands with you, or are you just like, I'm going to put my head down and keep charging? It's not about the accolades.
It's most of us. I mean, we all feel the same way. The reason why we do music is because we like doing it. We like playing with each other, and it just is an enjoyable career to have, so we don't really ever do anything for accolades. But when you're nominated for something like that, it does feel really fulfilling, and it is really encouraging, and it just helps us remind ourselves that we are doing something special here, and people seem to like it, and it's just very encouraging.
Yeah.
And I've been going to IBMA. Sans maybe a few years here and there, but I've been going to IBMA since I was really little. I did the Kids on Bluegrass program when Kim Fox was running it back when it was in Nashville. So I'd been involved for many years, but to be nominated for the actual awards, it does feel really nice.
To go from Kids on Bluegrass to Female Vocalist of the Year nominee, like, you're doing pretty good, AJ. That's
getting
awesome.
there.
And I agree. I think it's not about the accolades, and you can never chase the accolades. There's nothing you can really do that I think will reach people better than just doing what you love and what you're inspired to do. However, it is a cool moment of perspective along a big, long journey that sometimes can feel like a slog, and day in, day out, you're doing this thing, and you don't often pick your head up to kind of experience or get a sense of what the fans think, because it's just like on to the next gig. But here you have this moment where people are celebrating you for all this great music. So congrats, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it is a moment of keeping objectivity, because when you're at a show, you'll have lots of people come up and say, "Oh, this is like one of the best shows I've ever seen, like I love your guys' music," and you'll get a lot of these comments. But it's just because you hear that you don't really have that much of reference for how the rest of the bluegrass population feels. So just having a nomination means that, that is very much true, that people do like it.
Yeah. And as I said, it means a lot coming from that IBMA community
Yes.
because, we've been involved with IBMA a lot over the years, and we won a few awards when our first record came out, and it really did help our career. But I also remember feeling, it's similar with the Grammys. It's like, wow, this is a cool moment to just feel validated, for all this really hard work, because
Absolutely.
it's like the hard work just never ends. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like one thing to the next. And speaking of one thing to the next, you guys have a new EP that's coming out right now. There's, as of this conversation, there's 3 singles out: Tear My Still House Down, Glendale Train, and I'm a Believer. Cover to cover, a covers EP.
Yep.
Really, really cool idea. Tell me, where the idea came from, why you guys doing this project.
Well, it's cool because we've been doing a lot of these covers for a while, and we've had a lot of good reception with them and our take on them. And as Blue Summit, we've put out 3 records of mostly original material. I think there's only just maybe a handful of covers on those. And so we've always been an original band, but it seemed like, when you have such good reception on these covers and people are like, oh, is that recorded somewhere? Like, where can I find that? And all you can say is YouTube. It seemed like it was time to just put them all together so people can enjoy them in one place. And so we can have these awesome guests play on it. I think that was the other, idea of doing the covers thing is, if we're going to do covers, let's make it fun. Let's have, Lindsay Lou, let's have Kyle Tuttle, let's have Tim, let's have, all these great artists, Trey Hensley and Fung's on it too, killing that flute. Oh my God, it's
That's
awesome. Can't wait till Who Walks In comes out.
Great list of guests right there. And an interesting topic. I know it's one that we've kind of wrangled with over the years, the idea of how many covers to play, because I heard you just say in your own words, we're an originals band, same thing for the String Dusters, for sure. But covers play an important role, especially when you're getting going as a band.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you guys ever kind of struggled with that, like how many covers to play. We don't want to give people the wrong idea. We don't want to play too many covers. However, it's like that classic old saying, play something I know so I can tell if you're any good.
Yeah.
It's like open the door to these new fans. And how do you guys approach that?
Yeah, I think it's always a struggle for us because, what exactly classifies a popular cover per se? I'm actually Generation X. I feel like I identify more as a millennial, but it's okay. I'm Generation Z. And a lot of people in my generation, they don't know what bluegrass is. They don't know like old country, and so something that we would consider like a popular cover in our genre isn't popular for them. So we want to choose a cover that is pretty multi-generational in a way, and something that we like to play ourselves. But yeah, sometimes it's just so unexpected with what's gonna quote unquote go viral. I did a Harvest Moon video with the Brothers Comatose, which is a Neil Young song, and
I saw it like how many millions of other people.
Yeah, and like people my age, they're like, they don't really listen to Neil Young, but they have that story of like, oh, I used to listen to that with my dad, and he used to play that all the time, and then it's popular with the dad, and then so it kind of depends. We still want to have like an acoustic-y popular cover, though. We do think about doing some pop covers here and there, but we haven't really crossed over into that yet.
The Harvest Moon cover. I'm glad you brought that up because I remember seeing that go by, and I'm wondering to myself, how much does that move the needle for you? Because that was a big one. I mean, that was like millions of views. Or where is it at on social media platforms? Do you know?
I have no idea. I think last I checked on YouTube or something, I think it was like 5 million, 6 million, something like that. But that was a little while ago.
Yeah. So and also on Instagram,
like
millions. And we're not talking 50,000.
Yeah.
So what did you notice in the wake of that?
Well, we got a lot more followers. Broco got followers. Even to this day, and I think that video was put out maybe 3 years ago by now, 2 years ago, something like that. But even now, when we play gigs, there'll be a handful of people that come up and be like, I just discovered your video with the Brothers Comatose like 2 weeks ago, and we love all your stuff, and we're huge fans now. So we've been having a continuous stream of new followers because of that.
Was there any conversation with your team, your manager, your agent, like any feedback where they were saying, this video has changed the conversation about where we're going to be booked, anything like that?
I'm not sure if I mean it's all kind of tied hand in hand.
Mhm.
We've gotten more streaming numbers because of it, which I know a lot of festivals these days when you get booked, they're looking at your streaming numbers. So it's a factor in how you get booked and where you get booked for sure.
Why do you think that video caught so many people's attention?
It's a good question. I mean, it's kind of a niche thing already, still bluegrass. People aren't very familiar with, mandolin, that kind of
Sure.
instrumentation, and the acoustic kind of sound it's been having this sort of comeback
It really
with the
is.
single mic thing. It's very niche, and it just, if you have someone who's like, "Whoa, check out this video," I feel like it looks very aesthetically pleasing, and like I said, it's one of those treasured songs that does cross generations. So
Well, that's what I was going to say. I feel like the performance is great and you sound great. Brothers Comatose, I know that made a difference for them. I mean, I just out of curiosity, I was watching their numbers, their followers, and they really got a big bump from that,
yeah, yeah.
which is cool to see. But it's always a relevant question because in this day and age, no matter how much of a live artist you are, because that's what you are,
Mhm.
that's what we are. We're bands. We really our experience is about creating sound together, 10,000 hours, all those things. But yet there's this other side of what we do, and we're all trying to create digital assets for these social media platforms that capture people's attention.
Yeah.
But there's no formula to it.
No.
It's like no man's land. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, boom, Harvest Moon.
Yeah, it is very frustrating. It's my least favorite part of the industry pretty much is doing all of the social media stuff and having to think about what people will like because I mean, there are strategies that people do, there's always engagement, quote unquote engagement, and that can be it doesn't have to be a positive thing, particularly with engagement. And so you can always play that game of, you know, the clickbait type thing, this guitar player shredding this or guitar player blah 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 doesn't make the right note or something, like that. And I think we just refuse to play that game in a lot of ways, which could be to our detriment, but it's just so necessary and annoying at the same time.
Well, it's funny to hear you say that because you guys kind of, you nailed it with one. And I'm sure that kind of opened the door for some of the other stuff that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
But it still doesn't necessarily turn that into a medium that you love. Because I know what you mean. We just want to play music. And yet there's this sort of chase underway to make something that's, 15 seconds long. It's like 15. How much can you really express in 15 seconds? That's the part I struggle with. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, I'm also confused too because I know it's like that you want to keep it short for the attention thing, but I also heard that the algorithm also now likes a minute to 2 minutes, which I'm confused about because I just got caught on to the keep it short thing and now they want it to keep it a little bit longer.
Ah, the algorithm.
Yes.
So much talk about the algorithm, but it is, and I think it always will remain somewhat of a mystery because, as you know, there's sort of this fine line, like that Harvest Moon video that could have gotten 3,000 views. I mean,
Yeah.
you probably didn't have any big expectation for that when you made it, right? It was probably just like everything else you were doing, right?
Yeah, no. I'm not sure what Ben or the boys were thinking either because I know because it's part of their I think it's called something biscuits or whatever that
series that
series.
they
Yeah,
do,
the series
yeah.
that they're doing, and they've been putting out all those videos. So I don't know if it was just like a numbers game,
Yeah.
and the algorithm was like, oh, there's all these videos. Maybe we'll just push one or something.
Yeah. It's like lottery tickets.
Yeah.
It's like you just keep buying them, you keep making them, and
Yeah.
you sort of hope for the best. And it's frustrating because, you go out and you play shows, and I think there's a real feeling that these shows and you're connecting with fans. And the reality is, even if there are only 50 fans there that night, the connection is strong. It's hard to say how connected someone is, even if they're one of those 5 million people. But yet it's still great to be reaching new people. But I think for a lot of what I'm referring to as live artists who like to play live music, there's a rub here. There's
Mhm.
a challenge because it feels like something, not feels like, it is something that you have to do. But most of those times that you do it, it's just going to come back as another video that has, a handful of likes and a
Yep.
handful of views. But that's the game these days, right? And I
Yep.
mean, what do you feel like has changed in the 10? You guys have been a band for roughly 10 years, and the music industry is kind of changing at light speed right now. I mean, what else do you notice is going on? Things that you feel like you have to do
Mm.
to, sort of build your career.
Yeah. I've been asked a lot about, being a woman in bluegrass too, and that has made a big change over the last few years. I remember it started becoming a hot topic, when Blue Summit was still, a fledgling band and people were asking for interviews about, "Oh, what's it like being a woman in bluegrass?" And now, at least it seems like there's so many women artists in bluegrass. And there's so many artists in other genres now that are also women, and I feel like just the society itself has been more open to, being inclusive and acknowledging that, there's this, society that's been mostly, dictated by what men want to do and
Yeah.
what shows they want to do, and kind of brushing over the fact that there are these really talented women. And I'm also an Asian American woman, and, we've opened the door a lot to having a lot of, people of color do more in our genre as well. We actually Blue Summit, we just put on our first festival this year, inaugural Sierra Grass it's called.
Cool. How'd it
And
go?
it was great.
Yeah.
We kept it small. It was about 500 people. But yeah, we wanted to keep that inclusive ideal too, have a good handful of women artists and people of color if we can.
That's great.
But yeah, as far as like being a touring musician, like what we just talked about, the whole streaming internet presence thing is a whole, part of the industry that, like we've just been saying, we're still figuring out.
Mm.
Alongside doing the whole tour, you have to tour in order to make enough money to make a living. We tour about 140 or 50 days out of the year, I think. So we're still paying rent for the houses that we're not ever at, which is a struggle.
But the touring part is becoming tougher in ways.
Yes.
And I think a lot of bands are noticing that. I've had that conversation with a lot of people that extends to a few different areas, but one of them is travel. And I know even before we were starting this interview, you were telling me about your Rocky Grass travel horror story from last year. And those stories, do you feel like they're becoming more common?
Well, I feel like they can be more common because, well, it's picking whether you want to have a hard travel day via flying or have a hard day driving 12 hours in your van.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the flight thing, the airlines these days, I feel like everyone's been talking about it. It used to not be as bad.
That's mainly what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
for
the
whatever
air
reason,
travel stuff.
for Southwest, you can always expect a delay. American Airlines always expect a delay. Can't even talk about Spirit. Can't even bring anything on their flights anyway. But I I did notice that I think because at least the people working the airlines, it's always been this kind of battle between the flight attendants like not wanting you to bring your instrument and the musicians wanting to bring their instrument. I feel like they kind of just, they at least let you try more. I feel like there was a time where they would just say, no, 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 you can't bring that on. You can't try. You can't bring it. So at least there's that. But, if you're, we have to plan to be where we're going to be at least a day before we have to be there.
Same.
Yeah, because you can always plan for something to go wrong.
Yeah. And we've had it go wrong more this year than any year before. And because we are all spread out. And so, we've got Falco coming from Long Island, and he's had multiple times where he was planning to travel the day before. That all got messed up. Couldn't go into the day of. And it's like, well, if you had planned that for the day of, even, with a strong like contingency window, it's just between air travel, weather, and a lot of that, I feel like a lot of that changed during COVID and just kind of hasn't really changed back, you know? And it's just like one of those changes that comes on slow. You don't necessarily realize it as it's happening. And then all of a sudden, oh, wow, flights are a lot more expensive these days.
They're more expensive. Did planes used to fly in more wind or something too? Because I feel like with their excuses for the delays, I mean, I at least know flying into Denver, you get a lot of the wind, sheer wind kind of thing, which I don't really remember if that's always been the case, but I do feel like there's always these tiny little excuses that pop up that used to not be there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that we all have to kind of think a little bit more about, but I know that our focus remains on playing live shows. I feel like our
Yeah.
focus is honestly more that than ever before. And we do all the stuff that you have to do, but it's great to be able to just focus on the music. And I had I met one of my Berkeley professors when we were up in New Hampshire recently, and we had this funny conversation about his students he has these days, and we were talking about the social media thing, and he said, his students want him to show them how to play, the coolest 15-second riff they can play. I know. And he's like, "Oh, can we play Autumn Leaves maybe?" It's like,
Yeah.
but live music will always be cool. I always come back to that with
Yeah.
what's going on with travel, with what's going on with AI music. It's like there never will be a substitute for what we do, for what you guys do, and
Yep.
that's a good thing.
Yep. Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the band origin story and also the California bluegrass scene, because California's always had this great bluegrass scene, and I know that you're a big part of it these days. So start by just telling us how Blue Summit came together and how your guys' career got rolling.
So, like you mentioned, the California bluegrass scene, everyone in Blue Summit, except for now we have Sean on bass, who's from North Carolina. But every Blue Summit member and previous member, we all grew up in the California Bluegrass Association pretty much. And most of us knew each other from really little kids. I met Scott Gates when I was about 5 years old. And
How cool.
I met Sully when I was maybe like 6 or 7 years old,
No
and
kidding.
all the Tuttles. And I remember Blue Summit formed because I was playing with the Tuttles with AJ Lee band, and Molly was moving to Boston, so we were going to go on a hiatus. And my friend Isaac, who basically started the band, he was the original bass player. I was jamming with the original form of Blue Summit, and he's like, all of us here sitting like this, we're all in a band now. And I was like, okay, whatever. Sure,
How
I'm
old
not
were
being-
you guys at this point?
I think I probably was like 18 because, yeah, I moved from Tracy, California, where I grew up, probably around then when the band was forming, because I was doing a little bit of college, but I also wanted to play music with my friends, and I figured to do it while I was young. But we just started playing these bar gigs, as this configuration with no plan to become a touring band at all. And then, as life happened, we switched members now and then and started becoming full-time musicians. I used to be a barista, I used to be a dog groomer, and now I'm just a full-time musician as of probably maybe 7 or 8 years now.
So was there a point 7 or 8 years ago where you made the call, no more job on the side, going for this full time?
Yeah, well, I had to choose pretty much because I can only do so much
Sure.
part-time and only so much music, so I might as well, if I'm making X amount of money as a barista, I just have to work, that much harder to
Mm.
make that X amount as a musician. So it worked out. So far, it's been working out okay.
You guys had already been playing together for like over 10 years, it sounds like, at that point. So you
Yeah.
probably already had this really big shared repertoire. That must have been a huge help.
Yeah, and we've been friends for forever, and every single year we would always go back to our favorite festival, which is the California Bluegrass Father's Day Festival, and so we'd all reunite every year. If for those who weren't in a band, all of our friends would unite and we'd jam for a week, and we'd just let all of our energy out, and then
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Now, before we talk about the California thing, I'm curious, when you made the switch from being, let's call it part-time, to, okay, now we're going to be a full-time band and the schedule gets a lot more busy. Did you feel like your experience with music changed at all? When you went from sort of a more informal thing to like, okay, now this is my career and we got to show up and play shows and that's how we make a living. Did that inform the experience at all for you?
Yeah, well, I remember when we started doing more full-time, even during the transition from part-time to full-time, when you're playing your own gigs and booking yourself, you develop a sort of enhanced professionalism that, it's definitely touring musicians are in a different echelon, I feel like, than, just your regular musicians who play gigs in a band sometimes, because you have to know how to do everything. You have to know how to rap your own chords. You have to know how to talk to booking agents. You have to know how to make a plan, how to do the set list right. There's like so many elements of everything that you have to know how to do, and you progressively get better at all those kind of, I guess I could call them random tasks, I guess. You just like learn how to refine everything a lot more. And especially for me, I've learned how to not stress over the little things as much.
Okay.
So,
What would you stress over previously?
well, I would stress over like, okay, someone's wearing khaki shorts, and I told them not to wear khaki shorts.
That's legit, AJ Lee.
And it's
No
like,
khaki shorts on stage.
Yeah, I could stress over it, but they don't have a change of pants. What else am I going to do? Sort of little things like that. Or, we forgot to bring enough XLR cords, and now we have to use 3 mics instead of 5 mics. It's little tiny things like that where you just kind of learn to be zen about all these little struggles that you have. And I'm glad that it started with those little things like, oh no, somebody wore khaki pants or somebody didn't bring XLR cords. And now it's like, oh my God, our whole flight's canceled and we're going to miss a gig.
So that's the logistics side of things, but there's another big part of becoming a professional musician, which is, it's one thing to learn music and learn how to play music and sort of create your own voice. But it's a whole other thing to be able to do that on stage in front of people and to do it convincingly. And I'm wondering, it sounds like you started really young and you sort of, you gradually worked your way into this over 10 or so years. By the time you made the call, did playing on stage really feel any different at that point than playing music with your friends, or was it all sort of the same feeling experience?
Well, first off, I've always had stage fright. I still get nervous for shows, even though I've played hundreds and hundreds of shows. So that part hasn't really changed that much. But as far as, my experience on stage, I feel like now, like when I was talking about finding my voice, just relaxing more and being able to take more risks. I feel like before I was kind of a little bit anxious and stressed, and I wanted to play my part exactly like how I was supposed to play it, and like things are supposed to go a certain way. And now I feel a lot more fluid and, letting some mistakes happen. And a big thing for Blue Summit is like changing things up if we want to, and the whole improvising thing. If somebody doesn't want to play the song that's on the list, then we don't have to do that. But now it's been in regards to how I feel about it. It's been nice having more production team specifically, having our tour manager, Helen, just kind of take all of the stress off of the whole, like, having to do the set list and, all that technical side. Now I can just focus on how we want the set to feel and, just putting on a good show and making sure, we're all happy. The vibe, you
comes across.
Yeah. You want to be happy. You don't want to fabricate anything. If someone's having a fight, like, let's just talk about it. And, a show's a show, but like, let's make sure we're good.
But you still get nervous to this day.
Still get nervous.
I had Del McCurry sitting in that very chair yesterday, and he told me that he still gets nervous before every show. And
good.
I know, exactly. I thought the same thing because I feel that. And I've been doing this podcast now for, 6 years, I think. And I'm always surprised to hear other people say that they feel that, because I think that's one of these things. And this is a very normal thing to do. You're over here thinking, oh my God, I'm the only one who feels this way, and there's no way, no. And then you hear Del McCurry say it. And, I've heard other mentors say it and people that I look up to, and it helps me think about that feeling differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I'm actually really glad that I still get nervous because my mom actually gave me some advice when I was really young. She said, if you're not nervous before a show, then something's wrong. That's what she would say. She's
and
like,
what does that mean? What does that mean to you?
I haven't really figured it out quite yet because I still get so nervous all the time. But I have, I think I've played like a handful of shows where it seems really low profile and like, I'm not really nervous. Um, and I feel like I have ended up making just like kind of silly mistakes that I, usually wouldn't make because I'm not really like I'm not focusing on what I'm doing. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
really trying to make a show like really fun and enjoy it. I'm just kind of checked out a little bit. I'm not nervous. I don't really feel anything.
The nervousness, I think, can be translated into excitement would be one
Yes.
word, and just like what your mom said, if you're not feeling that, well, what is that indicative of,
Yeah.
And I also think for me, I view it as a challenge. This is something I've learned that's not a feeling that's not necessarily going away, and
Hmm.
that's okay because when we get into that position where there's this you're feeling like, oh, there's this piece of me that I want it to go away. That doesn't work great all the
Yeah.
time. Or I would say for me, I can only speak for myself. That doesn't work any of the time.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's much more about embracing it, accepting it,
Yeah.
understanding it, and then kind of channeling it in a new direction, right?
Yeah.
So like, is that something you think about? Like, okay, this feeling is upon me. I just need to remind myself, trust my work, something like that, before you
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good way to put it is, being nervous it's pretty much the same function as being excited. And I get anxiety too, like just as a person, as a lot of people do. I get anxious, and I have learned that being anxious and excited are basically the same function in the human brain. So there are, yeah, little tricks and things that you tell yourself as you're going on stage, like, oh, no, I'm just excited. This is awesome. Like, things are going to be okay. And then usually as the first song or two rolls around, then you don't really, it's just excitement and joy at that time. It's
It
like, it
passes.
totally passes.
Yeah. And then I almost feel like I settle in to a new place that I can't necessarily get into in the run up to a show. Even though, I'm warming up, we're going to play some tunes, we look through the set list, like in my mind, I'm really creating that energy, like getting ready to perform,
Yeah.
but you can't really simulate it. And then you go on stage and you kind of feel this rush and then you kind of settle in.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like working in your favor.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it's something like pre-show, you just, no matter what, you have an expectation. And then once you're there, at least for me, this has happened a few times where like during a show, like I'll be kind of heady and it'll take me a little while to get into the show. And then I'll reach a moment where it clicks for me where I'm like, you know what? This is just going to go how it's going to go. And sometimes there's nothing I can do to like, okay, I'm making a few mistakes. I have to let go of like my expectation of this is going to be like perfect, the best show ever. And then once I'm able to do that, it's just like you're kind of riding the wave of however the show's going to go. However you can play this next solo it's all going to be good.
That's acceptance.
Yeah.
Right there. And you
Yeah.
can't muscle things in a certain direction. I know one trick that works really well for me when I'm on stage, something I'm actually working on focusing on a lot currently, is if I do feel myself thinking, I'll just really start to listen and listen really hard, not even to myself, more to the people that are around me, my bandmates. And I'm like, wow, if I'm listening deeply, guess what? There's no room for really anything else, And I feel like that's the skill that you really develop early on when your like passion for music is evolving. You don't think about any of this stuff when you're learning to play music.
Yep.
But then when you're learning to perform, and so it's like and come to find out it's just like anything else. It's just something that you need to practice, something that you need to be aware of. But ultimately, acceptance. It's
Yeah.
like I can't control, or another cool way to say it is, for me anyway, to understand it is process, not results, right? Like I'm
Mm.
going to do what I know how to do, but not worry about the outcome.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do, but it just like takes practice, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's funny because for me, I feel like we experience this sometimes when we have our hangover sets, and you have like the 11 a.m. set after you play the 11 p.m. set. Those sets are always just so funny and goofy all the time. Like we actually just call them the hangover sets because
I
they
like
have
that.
a very kind of specific goofy feel. And I feel like that is so much acceptance when we play those sets because, I can't really play I can't play the cool solo or do the cool thing that I wanted to do. So it usually just ends up being like, we're just going to be really goofy and you take yourself way less seriously. Once you start getting locked up and when you're trying not to do the acceptance, you just gotta
Yeah.
be goofy and not take anything seriously while still just trying to have fun and it usually works out really great. Like we've talked about many hangover sets that we've said, you know what, actually I think that was my favorite set that we played this year.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. When you have those low pressure sets, it gives you an opportunity to tune into another vibe on stage. And it's really, like I say, it's just practice. It's just experience. That these things that we're talking about, they're not something that you learn about and then you can all of a sudden use on stage. Like
Yeah.
you got to really try it and find your own sort of version of that. Um, but I appreciate your honesty here. And I said the same thing to Del McCurry. I'm like, man, hearing artists, like you and Del, who I really think are awesome, say that is like, and I think for all our listeners too, it's like, eh, it's just music,
Yeah.
and you got to remind yourself sometimes because I know I tend to place a lot of importance on things. And that was why I ask about like the shift into music as your career. It can feel different, but we always got to remind ourselves like, we're not going off to war here. We're about to play some music. So
Yeah. You're just trying it out. You can always go back to something else.
tell me a little bit about the California bluegrass scene because I know some great musicians out there. I know there's a great sort of tradition of sort of its own strain of bluegrass, and it's been going on for a while. All the way back to like the Tony Rice and Grisman days, and now on down to you. I mean, give us a brief history there, or like who are some of your big influences in that scene, and what does that look like?
Yeah, well, the California Bluegrass Association, when we go to the East Coast and we tell people there's a big bluegrass scene in California, they're initially shocked because they think, that this music comes, you play bluegrass in Kentucky or you play it in Tennessee, but not in California. But no, that's the scene I grew up with. We have a lot of members and a lot of great pickers and people have had great careers since, the 80s and 90s. Lori Lewis, is a
She's
great
great.
great singer, from Good Old Persons. And, a lot of California people, we play some Vernon Ray, we're big fans of Larry Sparks. But,
Nice.
we have a pretty traditional scene there, as long as an old time scene, a progressive scene. Um, and I think it's always been hard for me to try to define what the California bluegrass sound is. Um, I guess the only way I can describe it is we we have a lot of influences. We've had Tony Rice, we've had, even the Grateful Dead people. It's kind of
Sure.
that crossover.
Definitely.
And so, also with the Bay Area, there's just so much creativity and so much music has come out of the Bay, and I think we just like try to incorporate many different things while also still maintaining, the traditional roots, like bluegrass from the '50s. So I don't know, it's really hard to explain, but I know that I wouldn't be the person I am today, and I wouldn't have the friends that I have today. I wouldn't have this amazing band that I have today if it wasn't for the California bluegrass scene. So I really appreciate everything they've done. Especially with the bluegrass pride stuff too. They're really a great organization, very supportive of
Yeah.
of a lot of different artists.
Bluegrass is really cool that way. And I think the community is this word, it's thrown around a lot. And I think it sounds a little cliche sometimes, but in bluegrass, it's so real. And I remember going to my first bluegrass festival and thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever experienced in my life. Why aren't there a million people here? But there are, it is sort of, there are aspects of it that are kind of underground, but it's such a community. And I still, like, when I go back to Gray Fox, which is the first festival I ever went to, I go visit with the people who I learned bluegrass jamming with. I
Mhm.
wasn't in a band and it's just a really cool thing. And obviously it's delivered you to a really cool place, in terms of exposing you to all this great music, great influences. But bluegrass is also like at the same time exploding on the one end of this spectrum, you know.
Yeah.
And I think even in the 10 years that you've been a band,
Yeah.
it's changed a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you can pinpoint ever since really Billy Strings kind of started becoming popular and filling stadiums of people. You know, as soon as the tickets go on sale, they're just all gone.
I know.
It's like this huge phenomenon. It's like he's the only one of his kind that's been able to do that.
Do you feel like any of that notoriety has trickled down to what you guys are doing, just turning more fans onto acoustic music?
I want to say yes and no, because I've been to a few gigs where I've talked to some of the people who are at the show who haven't seen us, and I have mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, do you know like Billy Strings? And I think it's like maybe 50-50. Some of them say yes, but some of them say like, no, I don't know who that is. And I would say like, how do you hear about bluegrass? And they're just like, oh, I don't know. Like I like going to concerts, and it's like the live music thing, like you were talking about. And I don't know if it's like some weird under algorithm thing feeding, people more bluegrass stuff because of Billy Strings. I don't know. There's something going on, but um, I know that Billy has gotten a lot of younger people into it, but I'm not really sure how much it has affected our shows in particular because, we do different things.
And I think one thing that's going on here too, I do think it's great for bluegrass. I do agree that I don't think it's translated immediately into like all the success for the other bands. And I think a lot of the reason for that is because Billy's fans are first and foremost into Billy.
Yes.
Bluegrass is part of it, but they're not going out and listening to Flat and Scruggs right away. Although the fact that he plays trad bluegrass in his set is an awesome thing.
Oh yeah.
And not only plays it, but plays it as well as you can play it. That certainly counts for a lot. Turning a lot of people onto bluegrass, yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to take a minute to trickle down to the rest of us.
Yeah.
And it no doubt is turning people on to the music, but yeah, he's a phenomenon like we haven't seen in a long time. It seems like bluegrass has these brushes with the mainstream along the way, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Alison Krauss, but now, it's headed in these new directions, and I'm certainly interested to see where it takes us.
I know, me too. I'm excited.
Yeah, and you are definitely part of that, AJ. So, keep doing what you're doing. Can't wait to hear you guys later today. And thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.